With the recent release of Babylon by Damien Chazelle, I've been given the idea to review and analyse one of my favourite films of all time. Chazelle's 2014 feature film is a film that stars Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons and follows the life of a young drummer at Schaefer Conservatory in New York City. Miles Teller plays this drummer named Andrew Neiman. Andrew is presented as a passionate drummer from the get-go. In the opening shot we can see him practicing one of his routines in one of the classrooms. J.K. Simmons plays a top-class teacher named Terence Fletcher. Fletcher acts as someone who Neiman looks up to and someone who he wants to be. The relationship between these two characters is what drives the film forward. We see Fletcher wanting to get the best out of Neiman, and we also see Neiman going through the troubles of going through Fletcher's class, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom back at home. The journey we see these two go through is what makes the outcome extra special. As mentioned in the opening shot, we can see Neiman practicing. This is interrupted when Fletcher walks into the room. This is the first time these two characters meet, and immediately we can understand a lot between the two. Neiman is immediately apologetic to Fletcher, despite him being the one disturbed on in one of his practices. This just shows how easy Neiman can be pushed around and how he can't really stand up for himself and will apologise if anything bad goes his way. He could be described as a people pleaser. I think it's also important to look at how each character talks to each other in this scene. Neiman is clearly nervous when he's talking to Fletcher. He stutters, he struggles to keep still, and his hands are moving all around his legs. He's clearly nervous about meeting one of his icons, and especially catching him while he's practicing one of his hard routines. Fletcher, however, is calm and collected during this scene. He asks questions and stands upright, just like an army colonel giving commands. During this scene, he asks Neiman a lot of questions about his name and which class he's in, showing that Fletcher, who's just come into the room, has already taken the power. This is an iconic theme that is explored throughout the film, and I will explain in another scene later on. What I like about this scene a lot is the fact that it's the opening scene, and yet already we know a lot about these characters. Only a few seconds in and we know who's who and kind of their personality traits just from listening to them talk for not even a minute straight. What I also like in this scene is the fact that Fletcher warms down to Neiman. He takes off his jacket and puts it on the back of the door and starts conducting Neiman to work into his routine, almost like he's testing him to his ability. This is more like something we see throughout the film. Fletcher warming down to Neiman and making him seem like he's here to help and the good guy, and then will snap immediately, which is something you see later on in the film. However, as Fletcher conducts Neiman, he starts getting into a rhythm and enjoying himself. You can tell he's liking what he's doing, and as soon as he's getting into this rhythm, the door slams and Fletcher is gone. This is interrupted then by Fletcher coming back into the room and collecting his jacket as a comedic purpose, but you can tell that meant a lot to Neiman that he left the room and kind of ignored him, despite kind of having this big opportunity to kind of impress him, to impress Fletcher and make him and put himself out there. Now, this relationship's something that is explored a lot throughout the film, and it's a key relationship between the student and the teacher. Despite Fletcher being a bad guy, there's still quite a strong bond between them, especially at the end when Neiman does eventually stand up for himself. Now, my favourite scene of all time throughout this film doesn't actually take place between Neiman and Fletcher. It takes place when Neiman's back home having a meal with his family, his auntie and his uncle, and of course his father, Jim. Now, it's important to mention that this part of the film, Neiman is kind of at a high in terms of his drumming career. He's just been made a core drummer after performing really well at a concert. Now, it's also important to mention that he only got this position because he misplaced a folder. This scene starts in the kitchen of this family's house. Jim and Neiman are talking to each other about how life's going. The first question is asked from Jim, so how's the drumming going? And every time this question's asked, there's a change in mood for Neiman. He becomes happy about talking about what he's interested in, and he's excited to talk about it, and he's saying how it's going well. He likes talking about how he's succeeding. Neiman's response to this question is actually, good, I think he likes me now, referring to Fletcher, which is a question that starts to form this relationship between Jim and Neiman. Now, at the start of the film, we do see the relationship is very strong. They go to the cinema together and they still have this quite strong bond. But here, Jim's responds with his opinion means a lot to you, doesn't it? Which is a way of showing how Jim feels a bit disconnected and understands that Fletcher's now this kind of like father figure to Neiman, and how he understands that Neiman wants to impress Fletcher rather than him. This is also summed up in the film's script, as it states, Jim looked at Andrew, almost accusatory, a moment. After Neiman responds, the conversation quickly changes, moving on the story, which is a start. And I think this bit of dialogue is quite important. It's a small section of the scene, but it's a way of showing the downfall between their relationship, and which will be supported later on in this scene. We then cut to the meal. Some time's passed. The lights changed from the window, and people are tucking into their meals and enjoying life. In this scene, we have Uncle Frank, Aunt Gemma, Jim, Neiman, and also one of the cousins, Dustin. The dialogue between the lot opens up with Frank talking to Emma and the rest of the table about how Jim's cooking was, saying Jimbo overcooked. He just laughs, kind of picking on Jim and making him and taking the mick out of him, which sticks to his character and is something we see throughout. He's pushed around just like Neiman is a lot of the time. And it's important that because in this scene we do see a shift in how Neiman acts, and I feel like showing this relationship changed how Jim's still being pushed around and can't stand up for himself is quite important in seeing that, because it's defined the change, it's defined these differences that will soon come. And we then cuts this moment with a comment to Neiman saying, "Andrew, how's the drumming going?" Which, like earlier, it excites Neiman. He's excited to start talking about his passion and starts getting into it, and even explaining that he's a core drummer. However, this is interrupted as one of the other children named Travis walks in which Frank responds, "Here he is, Tom Brady," and kind of cuts the whole moment that Neiman kind of had to kind of say who he was and how he's enjoying his drumming, and it took away, and you could tell in his face it affected him, and he's a bit annoyed about it, and that's just a bit of this anger that's starting to build up. The introduction of this character Travis builds up the pace on the table. Everyone starts talking about Travis and Dustin's accomplishments in American football, talking about how he's broken a new world record in the school and this, that, the other, in which Emma starts going through the table about how everyone's got these achievements going through Travis to Dustin to Jim to Frank, and then ends it off by basically saying the talent at this table, and then forgets about Andrew's accomplishments, and it's kind of an added on part at the end, and you could just tell it's very spiteful and forgettable, and it may be a mistake, but you could tell it affects Andrew, and it's still building up onto this anger, and it's still affecting him, and it's quite a strong part. However, this mention does kind of alert Frank to talk about this drumming, and he asks Andrew how the drumming's going himself, and despite the anger building up, he does get back excited about talking about his passion, and and this is where he mentions the core about the fact he's a core drummer again, and this gets the whole table listening, and they all start chipping in about questions and kind of like not really getting excited, just like demanding these questions. It's just not what everyone else kind of got. Now, I feel like throughout Neiman's dialogue, he's explaining a lot more about what he does rather than just simplifying it. And I feel like in this part, he's trying to make it seem like it's a much bigger thing than what everyone else is playing it as. He's trying to make it seem like it's a big occasion and not just like a side hobby. Now, throughout this whole scene, there's a weird bond between Neiman and his father Jim. There's eye contact being made from Neiman, and Jim's always keeping quiet to himself, eating, trying not to really cause a scene, or doesn't want to cause a scene, don't want to get involved. And it's quite sad. It's sad to see, because you can tell Neiman's looking at him, kind of helping some guy like support, and he's not really getting that. And then when they talk about the American football stories with Travis and Dustin, he's getting involved. He's talking about it. It's a sad relationship, and you can tell it's just drifting apart on both sides, not just one. Now, eventually throughout the scene, Neiman kind of questions Travis and Dustin's play, saying. Joking about it, saying that it's Division 3, it's not professional, and kind of downplaying their achievements just like they did with him. Now, this causes an argument between mainly Frank and Neiman, and then Travis and Dustin end up getting involved, and it's a 3-on-1. It's a bit harsh, and when he's got his father there and he's making eye contact, kind of like the help, it's a sad sight to see. The argument kind of ends up with Neiman leaving the table because his father mentions the Lincoln Center, which is responding to Neiman's comments on the fact that the NFL will never call up Travis and Dustin, just adding to this kind of spite between him and his father. And it's the start, like I mentioned, it's the start to their downfall, and Neiman ends up leaving the table, and it's also the start to the downfall of his family life. And eventually on in the film that he breaks up with Nicole because he wants to focus more on drumming because he's getting better and better, and this is his dream, and he's kind of pushing all his life to the side to focus on this, and it's a crucial part in the story. Now, overall, I find this film amazing. I think it's a brilliant story. I think the character arcs in it and the relationships, as I mentioned, are done perfectly. The ending's done right with the way that the ending's done right in the way that Fletcher is kind of still has this kind of bad guy in him, and yet Andrew stands up for himself, picks up this bravery to kind of rival it, and it in a way it brings out the good side to Fletcher because he does see that Andrew is this good drummer and that he doesn't need this pushing to become better, but also Andrew understands the pushing at the end. He understands why he went through all the hard work to get to be the best drummer that he can, and there's this it's this mutual agreement between the two. Jim kind of gets his bond back with his son as they hug in the ending scene with the performance. He's the first one to console him, and I think that's very important to see this. I feel like it'd be nice to see more relationship bond between them, but like I said, I still think there's enough there to show this bond. Now I love that. That's why I probably think this film's a 5 out of 5 for me. It's a solid film. I think it will always be one of my favourites. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend for you to see it. It's a brilliant picture, and I think it's like I said, it's a great story, and it's always one I recommend to people. Now, thank you all for watching Top Hat Films. Please feel free to subscribe and even leave your comments on what you thought about Whiplash in the comments if you've seen it or if you do intend on seeing it. Please feel free to check out my socials over on Instagram and Twitter with Top Hat Films, and I thank you all for watching. Goodbye.